Thanks so much everyone for watching. We've got an epic lineup tonight of speakers. We've got an awesome panel here. Amazing group of functional doctors, technology, activists for a leap forward in medicine.
This is a great gathering.
You know, our goal is to make it easy for practitioners to learn in community.
There's a lot of community happening tonight. I want to say welcome to all of the communities that are watching at home. This ecosystem that has been set up by the meetup groups, we believe will be the future ecosystem of this evolved primary care network that we are looking to develop, and it all revolves around you. There's an exponential potential to the future of medicine. This is an allopathic conversion machine that we have just created. And it has exponential potential because it can be seen by 1 billion people at no extra cost. That's the beauty of the internet.
Welcome to the Functional Forum, live from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thanks for joining us in the charge to accelerate the evolution of medicine. Please welcome your host, James Maskell.
Hey everyone. Welcome to the Functional Forum.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your evenings to come and be part of this community. We really appreciate it. We're going to be talking tonight about the evolution of primary care. So far this year, we've been focusing on the evolution of the specialties. So we've looked at oncology, neurology, and psychiatry, cardiology. Now, the theme that's been running through all of these is if we could do a better job at primary care and go upstream, we wouldn't have so many people being sent down into sort of this more expensive specialty part of medicine. But tonight we're going to take the bull by the horns and really talk about where is the leverage point for serious healthcare transformation, and we believe that it sits in this primary care space. So we're going to be talking about the evolution of primary care tonight, and I just want to start with this graph. So this graph is actually taken from Dr. Craig Tanio, who did a presentation back in November. It was the night before the election, and he was just really talking about where we're going to go in the next few years. So chronic disease represents 86% of total healthcare costs, according to the CDC, and this is actually a cool graph because it shows what percentage of the cost is being taken up by all these different issues. And so, you know, what he showed, and these are all from his slides, is that the primary care that we're moving towards, however you look at it, is value-based care. How do we find value in the system? And without meaning to go into too much of a boring maths lesson, you can see here that value is going to be achieved where we have really strong outcomes and really low cost. And we want to try and get the outcomes as high as possible and the cost as low as possible. We're going to be talking throughout this session about what the future of value-based care, primary care looks like. Because if you understand this equation, you start to see that a lot of things that we've been doing, the really expensive drugs and surgeries and even physician visits, are costly. And so it means that they're not particularly well set up for value-based care. They have to deliver really strong outcomes off those interventions. One of the big things we're going to be talking about is actually tracking our outcomes, and Christy's going to be talking about that a little bit later. So just hold on to that equation because we're going to be coming back to it later. So this is actually statistics from the Oregon legislature where they basically showed that an investment in primary care reduces costs all the way down through the system. And so particularly the primary care that we're going to be talking about here today, but you can make significant cost savings in the rest of the system by investing in primary care. And so this was actually the slide that he came up with back in November, and I think it speaks really what we're talking about today. So more investment in frontline care, whether it be primary care, health coaching, home-based care, and root cause approaches to care, multiplied by 21st century delivery models. We're going to be talking about that tonight. Technology, so we're going to talk about telemedicine, other ways to sort of reduce the costs of entry, time, and also professional development and redesign care models. Really excited to have Dr. Sachin Patel making his debut on the Functional Forum tonight. I think he's running one of the most innovative practices in North America. I'm really happy he's going to be here to share. And if we do that, we can hit the quadruple aim. Now, you may thought there was only a triple aim, but there's actually 4, and that's lower costs, higher outcomes, and then both patients and providers being satisfied with the outcome. And there is the potential for that within inside functional medicine. We just have to try and hit that quadruple aim. And I think what we're going to see today is there's the potential to do that. So a warm welcome to our first speaker. She is a naturopathic doctor. She is an educator for the Institute for Functional Medicine and a Minnesota local. Please give a warm Minnesota welcome to Dr. Christy Yu.
It's wonderful to be here. It's a real, true honor. I have the privilege of opening up the discussion for us tonight to talk about where are we going in primary care today. And so I also have the honor to introduce and really hold the space for the functional medicine movement. So as an appointed faculty and also now a director of medical education at the Institute for Functional Medicine, it's a real pleasure and joy to get to watch the movement happening on a global platform. It's truly exciting to see practitioners of all types embrace, again, the science, but also the art of doing effective and really good medicine. So this trickles down to our discussion and our coordination back to primary care. So I can tell you, I have the honor of sitting through all of our boot camp courses, the Applying Functional Medicine and Clinical Practice course, where practitioners come in and they get ready to dive into a 40-hour program that week, and things just start to break down. It's interesting. The thoughts that they knew about medicine start to challenge them. And you can sort of watch these waves of emotion that grip and grab practitioners as they go through this entire week where they're being asked to stop and just think about, what are they doing in medicine today? And what are they treating? And where are they going next? And functional medicine asks every single provider to do just that. So we leverage and base our approach in functional medicine off of a roadmap. And that roadmap is an interesting roadmap because it's really that of following the aspects or the principles of being a grounded, solidified, healthy individual, planted firmly in the ground below you, and bearing fruit and holding a space of solidity in this world. So in functional medicine, we use the image of the tree. The tree represents the healthy individual that's anchored firmly into lifestyle attributes. And there's some valuable tools that we use when teaching practitioners and physicians, as well as some very powerful and impactful tools to help our patients understand why we're utilizing those. Now, I'm going to shine the light on tonight as well what we call the heuristic or the governing operating system that drives all functional medicine providers. And it's this simple summary that's called go to it. So can I ask you to say that with me? Are you ready? We're going to go to it. No, that was not very good. Can we try that one more time? All right, ready? Go to it. In functional medicine, practitioners, regardless of their background, whether you're visiting with a naturopath or you're talking with a medical doctor, you're working with a nurse practitioner, or it's an acupuncture that's been trained in functional medicine, the functional medicine movement helps to create this language, this flow, or this organization, so that all providers who sit down at the table together are thinking through the same flow, the same organization process to move forward. So I'm just going to shine the light on two key tools tonight that are a part of our gathering and our organizing. So we're going to gather this medical information in a very unique way that's very specific to the functional medicine principles. And then we take all this information we've pulled in and then we organize it. And we put it together in this very unique model that's called the Functional Medicine Matrix Model. And that particular approach to medicine is what defines functional medicine and makes it very unique as a learning methodology. So just to pause for a moment and think about where we're going. If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got. And in functional medicine, we're here to shake it up a little bit. We're here to ask our patients to stop and step back and think about how did they get to this particular point. It doesn't just happen overnight for most individuals. And in functional medicine, where we serve our communities best is in supporting them in managing and preventing chronic disease. So let's look at some of the aspects or the attributes from lifestyle medicine. Now, in gathering data, and I can say now on an international or global platform, we finally have new innovations in technology that can help us gather this important and very unique information about our patients through the concepts of functional medicine. So, for example, one of the resources that we have launched into in the last couple years is a digitized data gathering system that has this large, robust patient intake on the front end that pulls all this information together and then populates that data into these two tools I've been mentioning to you. One of them is called the timeline. The other is the functional medicine matrix. And these two tools will come to light in this digital platform. And so saving practitioners time and the ability to gather information is part of where we're going in this new era. We need to be able to show proof of concept in functional medicine because doctors are seeing this in their offices every single day. We see group practices who are implementing unique group modalities and moving patients through different types of programs and getting remarkable results, reducing costs in chronic disease management. We need to capture this data. As a whole, the community in functional medicine needs to gather this data together to be able to show and demonstrate where more of the choice points are and where's the leverage in functional medicine. And you'll find for most providers it resides in lifestyle factors. Going back to diet, nutrition changes, working through sleep and restfulness, taking the opportunity to look at movement and exercise, focusing on relationships. So very important attributes. We want to gather this data, pull this together to move this aspect of primary care forward. So we now have these unique tools and resources where we can start to do this. We can communicate information to our patients, and information can end up in their emails, and in the future, their food plans will end up in their phones on their hands. And functional medicine will be working its way from the research all the way down to the patient's handheld devices, helping them implement. So we're really pushing the envelope in functional medicine with our innovative resources. We want to support the practitioners. We want to understand who this patient base is that's seeking the functional medicine doctor, so together in partnership, we can continue to move this forward in a cost-effective manner. So what has been discovered in digging deep into the data points of, who are these functional medicine practitioners? I just want to share just a small amount of data with you. In a large group study that was done last year with over 6,000 patient contact visits, it was stunning to find out that the average functional medicine patient was 44 years old. The average. And when looking at some of our interesting differentiation points with diagnoses, you can see that the average diagnosis was 6 or more at the age of 44. Stunning numbers. And looking at the prescriptive components, we wonder where the costs are coming in. Part of the costs are that we're not looking deep enough to find the sources or the causes of these problems. To be able to look at this array of these multiple diagnoses and say, what is under the surface that's truly impacting these conditions? What are our common denominators? That's one of the most remarkable things that functional medicine does, is it says, what are the common denominators? And what's so powerful about having functional medicine doctors with different backgrounds and disciplines work together is they're using the same language when they have these discussion points. They're using the same common theme while they're looking to find the common denominators. So interesting, when you walk in to see most functional medicine or integrative providers, most patients seeking this form of medicine are already connected to the fact that they realize through their own self-discovery and reading that the gut or the GI tract is so deeply connected to the rest of the system. Right? So many of our functional medicine patients present mindfully knowing that maybe their joint pain or their skin condition traces back to and is connected to some imbalance that they're experiencing in the gut. Right? So it is of no surprise when we step back and we say, well, let's look at the database and compare male and female patients. What are the number one complaints that people are presenting with? GI distress. Right? And when we look at some of these important associations in functional medicine, when we're struggling with the integrity and the quality of the function in the GI tract, now we're looking at nutrition compromisation. Now we're worried about issues with digestion and absorption and adequate nutrient levels. Does our patient even have the right balance of their macronutrients? Are they getting enough good quality proteins, fats, and carbohydrates? Is there enough fruits and vegetables in an array that the colorful ingestion of those phytonutrients is having an impact on the way their health is moving forward? These are all important questions that we'd stop and think about if we see GI distress with a patient. Like, what are some of the underlying impacts and causes? So in our population today seeking functional medicine, these individuals are reporting challenges with aches and pains, cognitive concerns, issues with focus and concentration. They're often stiff and they're sore. Or these symptoms have been coming on for quite some time and they can't really pinpoint how it began. It's just been chronic and slow and insidious. These are some of the areas where functional medicine shines, where we may not have the most clear-cut diagnosis, but we do know how to dig deeper and get to the underlying patterns. And that's the movement in functional medicine, is to say, what are the causes, or the causes of the causes, and how can we get down to that level to really transform someone's health? Now, one of the other very interesting and important aspects of functional medicine is the engagement of the practitioner and their state of mind. So we refer to this as the art of doing good medicine in functional medicine. And you'll see this huge movement is taking place actually across the platform of medicine. You'll hear special authors and speakers, for example, Dr. Elizabeth Frates, who is running the Institute for Lifestyle Medicine out of Harvard, running all the extension courses. What you're hearing out of Harvard's lifestyle medicine courses is the discussion of the coach approach, the critical role that the physician moves out of the space of being a dictator telling the patient what to do, but rather engaging them in a therapeutic encounter and ensuring that a coach approach in the conversation is happening. And when the physician takes a coach approach and moves that locus of control back in the space of the patient, transformations happen. Movement starts to shift. So functional medicine takes the time to put the practitioner in the right space, heart, mind, and soul, to be prepared, to be ready, to walk into that door and meet that patient in that space of receptivity, being able to hear and listen, continue to go further. So gathering plays a critical role. Gathering of the practitioner to ensure gathering of the information or the insight from within that consult or that conversation. So functional medicine stemming from the art and the science. And a real area we've been on for the last year in a lot of our training courses, and I've actually been working on with patients quite a bit, is this whole concept of ikigai. Have you heard of ikigai? Ikigai is the Japanese term that stands for that which drives you out of bed in the morning, that which gets you excited, that for which you live for. So if you were going to think about your ikigai, are there things that just sort of jump right out at you, the most important things that you think about the minute you open your eyes in the morning? Right, what we see in the functional medicine movement is we see functional medicine providers tuning into the functional medicine applications and getting back to the heart and soul of why they engaged in functional medicine in the first place. Going back to medicine and the promises that they had made to themselves. If you haven't spent any time looking at ikigai, it's a very interesting intersection. And it has to do this crossover space between that which you love and that which you are good at, and your capability to reach out into the world to deliver those resources and provide things that are needed. It's a beautiful interplay of you and your inner world and your outer world finding your purpose and potential. And I can tell you, I've been having more conversations with patients about this than ever. And I'm finding the patients that get moved and shift clinically are my patients who deal with anxiety and depression and mood disorders, taking the time to dig deeper and talk about purpose. So in functional medicine, resources and tools that bind us all together in this primary care movement is the timeline and the integration of this amazing tool in helping our practitioners think their way through the uniqueness of this patient in front of them. It's this tool that's used in gathering someone's storyline, the whole history of how the patient presented at this point. This is one of the anchoring tools used in primary care and functional medicine today, so that whenever there's an associated link, maybe a nutrition professional or a health coach or maybe another referral to another functional medicine doctor, the utilization of going back to leverage this tool and this resource to understand the patient's journey is a part of our common denominator. It's part of our language that helps us understand where did the patient begin and how have they moved to this particular point today. Now, in the functional medicine architecture, you'll also hear that one of the binding principles that drives this intake and the uniqueness of us uncovering the patient's journey and story comes back to and tracks back to these considerations called antecedents, triggers, and mediators. And we plot these back onto the patient's timeline. Now, one of the unique things about functional medicine is we also stop and look for these huge areas, these points of demarcation in the patient's storyline that tell us something huge happened. Not that we're going to be dealing with the diagnoses that come downstream, but we're going to step back and say, what happened here on this unique patient's journey that we want to focus on? So I want to show you the timeline of a patient I recently just saw back in my office. It had been almost 9 years since I had seen her in person. She came back to see me this last year, 54-year-old female. She was down to 225 pounds. She had lost 30 pounds since the last visit we had together, but was describing all sorts of fatigue concerns, aches and pains. She was dealing with disruptions in her sleep pattern and challenges with blood sugar regulation. And if you look at this list, she actually came in feeling better than when I had seen her years before. Right? And looking at the severity of this list, there was red flags all over. And instead of focusing on these areas, she actually ended up spending the majority of this first visit talking to me about her stress. And when I lit up her timeline, this is the digitized living matrix version of her timeline, you could see this huge cascade, this point in her life when everything began and things started to summate. This is an example of one of these unifying tools. This is the timeline with a very exaggerated version of what happens when we dig deeper and deeper and go into these spaces to say, well, what happened in this cascade of events? So this is a very important concept and tool that's used in functional medicine, it's used with patients, and it's used in self-care. It's used in self-care training courses for nurses, for coaches, for healthcare providers and residents. So in the model of the functional medicine matrix, what you will notice is that there's really three main areas. One is the delicacy and the art in which we engage in a conversation with patients. It's called the therapeutic encounter. Second is the base of the matrix, which is referred to as the modifiable lifestyle factors. This is one of the very unique things of lifestyle medicine and functional medicine both. They dive deep. These types of providers dive deep down into the lifestyle and really start there to see what is going to change, what will be transformed for these individuals if they happen to get the right amount of sleep, when they happen to create the right healthy relationships, or figure out how to handle and manage the unhealthy relationships. Just thinking here, do you have any relationships in your life that feel kind of toxic? Is there anybody you know that makes you feel kind of sick when you're around them? Right? So, I mean, sometimes the conversations we're having with patients at this level of lifestyle have to do with relationship and community and healing, helpful relatedness. The healthcare provider is a part of that care team. So in the functional medicine model, you've got the therapeutic encounter, you've got the modifiable lifestyle factors, and then the third area of great interest to physicians and primary care has to do with the clinical imbalances that stem back to what's referred to as systems biology. And this is what's new and unique that's been emerging over the last couple decades in medicine. And it's not just looking at the disease individually. It's not just looking at an independent individual organ, but rather stepping back and being able to look at the way multiple organs work together in a system, in a biological base. So it's referred to as systems biology. And so the unique aspects or those attributes of being able to identify and continue to move forward with a unique patient have to do with us saying, okay, for this patient, what is their base? How well have they taken care of themselves? We move ourselves back up into the trunk of that individual, and that's where systems biology and our genetic predispositions reside. So in functional medicine, what is so unique and cutting edge that's impactful and effective that's bringing the life force back into physicians? It's them getting to step back and say, what are the causes of disease? And learning how to find them and understand the pathophysiology and to be able to connect the dots to recognize patterns that weren't viewed through the previous lens.
Thank you so much, Christy. Beautifully said. So many things that I'd love to follow up on there. We have got a tight show tonight, but I think this is a beautiful model to sit with. You know, part of the reason why we wanted to get the meetup groups going is to introduce practitioners who could be part of this model to each other. It could be a lonely profession to do integrative and functional medicine over the last 30 years because we were a little bit weird, right? Not accepted by the mainstream of medicine, and so you had to work hard to find these kind of providers. But the good news is that it's happening faster and faster than ever, practitioners getting together in communities like this. So I want to come back to this equation and talk a little bit more about it because, you know, having looked out, we're in a really unique position at the Evolution of Medicine where we can look out and see all of the different practices that are delivering this care and see what the best practices are. And what we need to get good at is start to thinking in these terms, because the way that we actually delivered dollars in the past in medicine was actually basically cost times the number of patients. You did this many stents to this many patients, that's what we're going to reimburse you. But now cost is coming below the line. So there's a real focus on delivering things that don't cost a lot. And guess what? That's most of our stuff. If you believe that functional medicine is expensive, compare it to Humira or a colostomy bag or anything else that you're using or an operation or otherwise. This stuff is low cost and the outcomes are strong. And so what I've done is looked at, if you compare what a regular functional medicine practice has looked like up until now, what can we do to create a value-based care practice? So this is what I'm calling the clinical structure for value-based care, and this came to me while I was in Australia. So I was sitting in Australia when this came to me with a 15-person provider team. 15 providers sitting around once a week. They got 6 patients in an inpatient facility. Shout out to Marcus and the rest of the people in Byron Bay. But it was amazing to watch 15 of them discuss a case. 5 physicians, all these other providers, and it was just incredible. So most practices, what you want at the middle of it is a core. So that's either going to be your integrated provider team, like Christy was sharing, or it could be a mentorship community. Tom and Christy are members of a Facebook group for practitioners, functional medicine practitioners, where people put their cases and you get a lot of people coming together. Now, core is good. Lots of different eyeballs on the same practice case is good. But it's expensive, right? You've got to have all those practitioners times X dollars per hour. It's the most expensive thing that we could do. So that's why it's at the middle and not on the outside. So core is the central, and I suggest that everyone find themselves a core, whether it's a mentor or want to join one of the Facebook groups where you can actually get feedback from other providers in real time. The second thing is care. So now you've got that core team. What is the care that they actually provide? Now, up until a few years ago, the only practices we saw had these two things. You had the providers, and then you had the care that those providers provided to their the patients that came in. And I don't think this is particularly well set up for value-based care. But I think if we can add a few elements to it, we could build on this foundation to create a practice that's really built for value-based care. So the next level out is coaching, and particularly health coaching. And why I think the functional medicine health coaches are really well positioned in the future is because they speak the same language. We heard Christy talking about the secret same language. So, just to put this into context, if you've got a patient with type 2 diabetes and they need to make behavior changes, if we go back to value equals outcomes divided by cost, if the doctor's $300 an hour and the health coach is $30 an hour, is the doctor 10 times better at getting outcomes for that thing than the coach? And the answer is definitely not. Maybe not even better at all, right? And not 10 times better, but that's the equation that you're looking at when you look at the value-based care equation. So a layer of coaching between patients and the core care team, and Sachin's going to talk a little bit about how he does it, but coaching is a really important part. If we want to get behavior change, we need people trained in behavior change. The next level is community. So community is really strong. I mentioned Dr. Kara Parker, but group visits is one example. Sachin talks about some of the way that he's doing it. The power of peer-to-peer interactions goes beyond what Tom was saying. Yes, it can motivate someone, someone who's been through this process, telling someone else about that process could be more motivating than any provider. But the cool thing about community is a peer-to-peer transaction has zero cost. There is zero cost, and we don't have to go back to maths to know that if you put 0 at the bottom, then value is infinity, right? So think about what are the lowest cost interventions that we can do. And then the outer ring that I'm going to put on here is content. And so we have the founding editor of the Experience Life magazine, Pilar, here this evening. I'm not sure if content has ever been thought about as a part of medicine, but it clearly is. Kara Parker, when she's doing her group visits, the first thing she does, she gives a 4-week training on all the basics of keeping yourself well. So here we have this 5-step process that I think is the future of value-based care. And if you look at it from the patient perspective, how do you come into this practice? You don't get to the core straight away, right? Because is it even worth it? You don't want to be spending that. The first thing you come into contact with is content. And that could be the stuff you're putting out via social media. It could be what's on your website. It could be your email series. Content is free, and there are some people that just don't know anything, and if a little bit of content could get them well, and that's free at zero cost. The next thing, I'll go back. The next thing is community. Again, Sachin's going to talk about how he does it, but inviting people who have engaged with your content into a situation where you can introduce people who want to be healthy to each other. Right? The most powerful thing that you could ever do is introduce 2 people who want to get healthy to each other, because they'll be accountability buddies. And again, it's no cost, but it's so much value for you. The third is coaching. How do we provide an opportunity for all the lifestyle stuff and the coaching to be done by a provider at the lowest possible cost before you get into the care of a provider, particularly a physician, and then the core? So think about this as you're developing your practice, because this equation is not going away, right? Obamacare had value-based care. Whatever Trump care looks like will be value-based care. International is moving to value-based care because they realize the incentives are insane when you pay people for what actual work they do, because they do all the wrong stuff, all the stents and none of the exercise or walking groups, right? So this is the equation for the way that medicine is going, and we need to create practices that are designed around this structure. So with all that, I'm very excited to welcome to make his Functional Forum debut, Dr. Sachin Patel. Someone told me about him a couple years ago, and the first thing I did was to interact with his content, to follow him on Facebook. And I have never seen, I don't know any other clinic in the country that is pumping out the kind of results that the Living Proof Institute is. And I know that because I see it on Facebook the whole time. I see case studies, I see letters from patients saying how their life has been transformed. I've been to the clinic. It's in a co-working space. It's the same kind of thing, the low overhead practice. They used to have one room, now they've got 6. And so, I'm very, very excited to talk about innovation in delivery models, innovation in marketing. It's a great pleasure to welcome to the stage for the first time. Please give a warm round of applause, Dr. Sachin Patel.
So today we're going to talk about some very important things. Now, where this presentation stems from is a question that I got about 2 years ago that was actually a Facebook message to me. And the question was, and I'm going to pose it to you as well, is what would you do if I wrote you a $250 million check to advance functional medicine? Would I prepare practitioners for the tidal wave of patients that's headed our way? There is not a shortage of patients. And I want you to get that out of your head immediately. There is not a shortage of patients. There is a shortage of practitioners that are ready to handle the patients and provide them with a service without them falling apart. Our practices have to be ready for what's coming, because if somebody did write that check and we did run a Super Bowl ad, what would happen to your practices? Do you have the business infrastructure in place to handle the millions of people that are sick? Who has that? Not very many people. I'm not a researcher. I don't build hospitals. I have people on my team that were building hospitals, and now they're helping us build the future of healthcare. So I applaud you all for being here, because I know it takes courage. It takes a lot of courage to leave what you were doing. It takes a lot of courage to take a $250,000 education and decide you're going to do something else. It takes a lot of courage to take a temporary pay cut from something that was comfortable, albeit you may have been getting paid to do something that wasn't congruent with your belief system. It does take courage. It takes courage to swim upstream. It takes courage to go against the naysayers, doesn't it? It takes a lot of courage for all of you. And I acknowledge you for that. So we're all courageous people, and we're all walking on this proverbial tightrope. It's important for us to be successful. It's important for our patients and our communities for us to be successful in business. Okay? This is a business. It's a business of fixing people. It's a business of fixing communities. It's the business of transforming countries. That's what we're going to do. That's what we have the capability of doing. When I realized the actual magnitude of the problem, the solution became very apparent to me. The solution wasn't for me to get as many people as possible to come into my office. The solution was for me to keep as many people as possible out of my office. If all of us functional medicine practitioners became successful overnight and flooded our practices with patients, there would still not be enough of us. That's a drop in the bucket. The existing solution and the proposed solution cannot actually fix the magnitude of the problem. So we have to create a bigger solution, a solution that actually keeps people out of our office. So that's how I've built my entire business model, is to solve that problem. And that's why I create so much content, because I want to keep people out of my office. I don't want the sickest people in my community coming to see me after they've failed all these different practitioners' care, after they've taken all these drugs, after they've tried all the different surgeries, after they've been to many other even natural healers. And one of the things that Dr. Christie talked about is that the solutions are based and grounded in lifestyle. So if we can get people to make these lifestyle changes and teach them how to make these changes, then we can give them the courage to heal themselves, because the body is capable of that. And we're proving that day in and day out. What we do as functional medicine practitioners is we find what's interfering with that innate potential. Okay? So I honor you for your courage. The next thing it takes to be successful in practice is to have congruence. And not just congruence in your diet, but in congruence with every single thing that you do. You got to be congruent with the way you sleep. You got to be congruent with your relationships and the people whose company you keep. You got to be congruent with the way you exercise. You can't tell your patients to do something that you yourself are not doing. It's important as practitioners that we're also vulnerable with our patients. It makes us a lot more relatable when we tell them what our struggles are. Okay? Everyone that I know in functional medicine didn't start off in functional medicine right out of school. You usually, for the most part, had some sort of health challenge of your own. So don't hide from that. Embrace that, because then you can meet the patient where they're at. Communication, we find, is also very critical and extremely important. You know, this idea that people like to be communicated with the same way that you like to be communicated with is actually very incorrect. They've identified 4 primary communication styles. Some people like you to be direct. Some people like you to be more empathetic. Some people like you to be more cautious with the words that you use and more analytical with the words that you use. One of the things that we do on our intake form, which is quite extensive, is we actually have a communication guideline questionnaire. It's 1 page. It's the first page I look at when I look at my intake form before I even look at their chief complaint. And the reason I do this is because I need to know what words to use to get this patient to change their life. Collaboration is also very critical, collaborating with your team. So we have health coaches. My wife, she's also a photographer and filmer. She's a pharmacist. She works in our practice. Okay, we have chiropractors. We have nurse practitioners. We have medical doctors. We all collaborate. Each one of us brings something new and different to the table. But our ultimate goal is the same, which is to help providers. What we've done is we've figured out where in the timeline of treatment each provider fits in. The next thing is consistency. Never be afraid to give out your best information. That's what your community deserves. It deserves the best of you. If I can help 5,000 people by posting a 2-minute video, that's like magic to me. Contribution is a big one as well. Because you care about your community, you have to contribute within that community. The last thing I want to talk about today is community. Community is extremely important. And the way we leverage our community is through Facebook groups. So communities are an excellent way for you to grow and scale your message and provide tremendous value to your patients.